Did I understand any of what was happening throughout the show? Absolutely not. Did I just kind of sit there dazed and confused for a lot of it? Yeah. But does that mean I didn't enjoy myself? No. Well, hello you lovely lot, and welcome back to another stagey video here on my theatre-themed YouTube channel. Now, this is an exciting one, as I feel like I have a lot to say. We're going to be trialling a little bit of a different format, so bear with me and let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Does it work? Did you prefer my old format? Who knows? I want you guys to tell me. But without further ado, let's get into this, because today we are going to be talking about my trip to see Jesus Christ Superstar. I went to go and see Jesus Christ Superstar on its opening night of the tour in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Playhouse on the 6th of February, and I went in knowing literally nothing, and so when Edinburgh kindly invited me to check it out, of course I had to jump at the opportunity. I love going into shows completely blind, knowing nothing about them. Of course I'd heard of Jesus Christ Superstar, but couldn't have told you what it was about, so it was a real treat. That being said, to catch you guys up to speed, what on earth is Jesus Christ Superstar actually about? Now, Jesus Christ Superstar is a Andrew Lloyd Webber show. He did the music whilst Tim Rice did the lyrics to all of the songs, and I think that very much shows in the grandeur and style of the music. But ultimately it is the story of Jesus Christ from the point at which Judas starts to turn on him up until the crucifixion. Now, I only know that after having done some Googling afterwards. I myself was never raised religious, so short of Jesus being born and that's why we have Christmas, I couldn't really tell you a whole lot about the Bible. And so I think that means I've had quite a interesting take on Jesus Christ Superstar, as I had no religious preconceptions or knowledge going into it. Jesus Christ Superstar is also a musical that is entirely sung through. Again, I didn't know this going into it, but think Les Mis, Miss Saigon, there is very, very little points of just straight talking, and when there is straight talking, it is used as a very poignant and symbolic thing. So if you're not someone who is into musicals that are entirely sung through, this maybe isn't the show for you. But I thought that bit of knowledge would maybe be helpful when I go on to discuss other things as well. Before we dive into the review, in which I'm going to go over the good, the bad and the ugly as always, I would like to put this sort of warning out there that, like I said earlier, I'm not religious, and therefore some of the things I'm potentially about to say, if you are religious, might not be to your liking. I'm not purposefully trying to go out of my own way to be offensive to people that believe in the Bible and its teachings. I merely know nothing about them, and therefore every perspective and or opinion I'm about to share is linked to that. So I thought I would get that out of the way. And as always, anything negative I have to say about the show is by no means a reflection of the cast and creatives involved in putting the shows on. It is merely a reflection of my personal taste and what I like to see when I go and see a show at the theatre. So with those little caveats out of the way, and with you guys all caught up on just exactly what Jesus Christ Superstar is about, let's start by discussing the good. Now, the first thing, and it would be stupid for me to put this anywhere other than first, were the performances. My goodness, the performances, the vocals showcased in this show were amazing. All of the music is kind of like rock anthems, hence Jesus Christ Superstar. They are very grand, they are very powerful, and the vocal performances really did add to that. Ian McIntosh as Jesus and Shema Mari James as Judas were some fantastic performances. The power and the strength within their voices to pull off these huge vocal numbers, a lot of which were solos, were fantastic. When you're singing a solo like that, it can be very vulnerable, and the sort of commitment and the way in which they embodied the lyrics and the characters while singing were phenomenal. Like, you couldn't help be like sat on the edge of your seat, like watching it just unfold before you. It was phenomenal. Some other standout performances for me were Hannah Richardson as Mary, as well as Jad Habshi. I'm sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong, but his voice was so deep and so rich and so beautiful. Every time he sang, it gave me chills. Like, I feel like there's very, very few opportunities for such a deep vocal range to be showcased, and for it to have a little spotlight in this show was lovely. Like, it was gorgeous. I would also like to highlight Timo Tatsba as Herod. It was gorgeous, it was campy, it was stunning, it was so fun, and it was a nice little break from the sort of seriousness of the rest of the show. Of course, it's a very serious moment for Jesus, but Herod was having the time of his life, so I really, truly did appreciate that, and the performance that was given. I loved it. Think King George from Hamilton, like that vibe, but make it more gay, like a drag show. Loved it. So obviously, as you can tell, performances were a huge highlight for me. Another big thing that I really loved about this show was the set. I'll throw in a few pictures here if I've left any on my phone, so I've deleted quite a lot to film this, but I think it was really stunning. There was this massive sort of cutout cross in the background through which lots of different characters would appear and disappear, and there was like a tree behind it, which I thought was really nice. And then the rest of it was kind of like industrial, like red scaffolding, like you might see on the Golden Gate Bridge or like a bridge in Scotland. And I thought that was really, really nice and really cool. And then there was, of course, a big cross lying on the ground as well that moved and shifted and kind of acted as a bit of a platform for characters to stand on. It was incredibly gorgeous to look at. I love a set that gives us lots of different levels for characters to stand at. I do think it creates something very visually interesting as opposed to having them all on a level playing field. So I did appreciate that, and I thought it looked really good. I liked the kind of industrial vibe of it all. It could have been quite easy to make it look traditional or whatever, but I think, you know, Jesus Christ Superstar as a musical isn't very traditional. It's telling a tale as old as time, shall we say, with telling stories from the Bibles but setting them to these powerhouse anthems. And so I think it was the right choice to give it a slightly almost industrial modern feel to it as opposed to going down the more historical route. There was a member of the ensemble that I found really interesting as well. She acted almost like the Bullet would in Hamilton. She was the one that sort of foretold or foreshadowed certain events happening through her choreography and the way she moved on the stage. She never said anything, but she often stood out from the ensemble either in what she was wearing or the movements she was doing in contrast to everybody else. And I do think that was an interesting inclusion. Like, I've never seen the original version of Jesus Christ Superstar, so I don't know if this inclusion is something that was there in the original or has happened as a result of the choreographer taking inspiration from Hamilton. But either way, I thought it was really good. I thought it made it almost slightly easier. Even if you didn't quite understand what she was doing, it made it easier to kind of follow the story, to be like, here's sort of what's happening, or you need to be focusing on this, or look, oh, I've already foreshadowed this. So I really, really did enjoy that. Speaking of choreography, that was another highlight. This show had a very big ensemble, a bigger ensemble than I was expecting, and there is something very satisfying about that many people moving in unison. It was really good. It was really dynamic. It looked exhausting, so props to all of them for doing that. Like, phew, as someone who, you know, can't dance, I do always think it is impressive to see that many people being so good at it and doing it all in unison. Like, I really do sort of appreciate that. And I think it really helped make the show what it was in terms of making it engaging and keeping it visually interesting for those of us in the audience. Another thing that I really liked, and I maybe should have mentioned this back when I was talking about the set, but it was the fact that the band was visible all of the time. I love a show that makes the band a part of the show. They had them on stage, much like they do, I believe, in Jersey Boys, where they were sort of up on the different platforms. And okay, they were in shadow, but you could still tell they were there, because I feel like the musicians often don't maybe get as much credit as they deserve for their ability to play an entire show without a break. So I do think it was really great for that. And they used a penny whistle synth to like pop off, I'm not gonna lie. There was also a moment at the start of the show where the ensemble came running through the audience. Now, I have seen a lot of shows at the Edinburgh Playhouse, and I have never seen them use the aisles like that before, so that was really great. I don't know what the effect would have been like for people sitting up on the different levels, as I was in the stalls, and so they came running right past me, and I don't know if that effect or that feeling of, like, being involved carried all the way up to the top of the theatre, but I do appreciate that it added a different and more dynamic element to the show again. So there was everything that I loved about the show. Now, everything I'm about to say for the bad and the ugly, don't take this as me being negative. It's just me literally nitpicking things that I didn't like, maybe things that I think I would have done differently if I were in other people's shoes. So that being said, let's go to the bad. Now, given how much I had to praise about the show, you might be wondering how I could also at the same time find things that were bad. And I think the biggest thing that I struggled with throughout the show was just knowing who people were. I think in my notes whilst I was watching the show, which I've scribbled down here, I wrote, "Show don't tell, ? I need them to tell me." I don't know if I had come to this show with more religious knowledge than I have, whether it would have made a bit more sense. But yeah, I really struggled. There were I worked out who Jesus was and I worked out who Judas was, but other than that, I had no idea, okay? there were very few characters that had their name dropped at all, and I think I could have done with a little bit more name dropping to make it obvious that I'm like, oh, okay, that's who this is, that's who this is, short of just Jesus and Judas. Because there's a lot of other characters that you do need to pay attention to, and I think it would have helped my understanding, even if I could just look at someone on stage and be like, right, that's this character, that's this character. So I think that was a little bit lacking for me. Maybe they did mention them and I just didn't hear, because audio issues is something I will be getting onto in the ugly. But yeah, it's just a little bit confused. The biggest instance of this was when a man walked out looking like emo Sebastian Vettel. I thought, this is Herod, okay? Because I knew Herod was a bad guy in the Bible. Turns out it wasn't Herod. I think it might have been a Caesar. Hey Google, which emperor killed Jesus?
Tiberius. According to Wikipedia, according to the Gospels, Jesus of Nazareth preached and was executed during the reign of Tiberius, by the authority of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea province.
What, like Tiberius as in Tiberius Caesar? I have learnt so much, guys. Okay, my understanding now from what my Google Home has just told me is that the emo Sebastian Vettel was a member of the Julio-Claudians, specifically Tiberius Caesar, because they did keep mentioning Caesar, and I was like, well, I don't think it's Julius Caesar. But it doesn't make sense. This actually confused me more, because Christianity didn't pop off until a lot later. So maybe I'm missing something, or maybe I'm not. If you know which Caesar or which Roman emperor this guy was supposed to be, because I do know he was supposed to be a Roman emperor because he had this like really sick looking crown, please let me know in the comments, because my confusion I think is evident. But that just goes to prove the point that I do think maybe mentioning names a little bit more would have helped people like me who just did not know what was going on. And I think if I had had names, the plot would have made a bit more sense as well. Another thing that I will call bad is the fact that I very much believe that Andrew Lloyd Webber can't write women very well. Maybe that's just a personal preference, and I don't know about Mary as a character within the religious context, so maybe he got it spot on, but I do think Mary should and could have been allowed to be more than just like a sex worker for Jesus. Like, it's implied that she really loves him, but then, like, Judas goes around slagging her off, and Jesus is kind of like, oh, there's a higher calling. I don't know, it was just sort of, I was like, for the only woman, like, the only named woman in the show, and you do this with her. Like, I get, you know, there is sort of historical context that you're basing it on, but I feel like we could do better. And I think, again, maybe you could blame me for this, but I do think it was very confusing without prior religious knowledge. I didn't really get what was going on until, like, right at the end. I was like, oh my god, I remember this chapter! I remember this part when they're crucifying him. You know, because I feel like everyone kind of knows that bit. Okay, with the bad out of the way, as confusing as I think that was for both me and maybe you, let's get on to the ugly. Now, the ugly is not necessarily anything to do with the show, but it is something I feel like I have mentioned as ugly in every video I have ever made about the Edinburgh Playhouse, and that is the sound. I think, again, probably didn't aid with my understanding in that I couldn't really make out the words that they were saying most of the time over the music. And so I do think had the audio been slightly different, it maybe would have been easier for me to understand. I will also say it was loud to the point of hurting my ears. Now, I am a frequent rock concert attender. I have ruined my hearing beyond reason, most likely. But I have never been to a rock concert with music this loud. Like, it was actively making my ears hurt, and I've never had that experience in a theatre before. Specifically when Jesus was singing his, like, big Woe Is Me song. I was like, these speakers are literally about to explode. Like, my ears are really, really hurting. There is that. So bear in mind, if you are going to see it and you are someone who is noise sensitive, it's very loud. And then the only other thing I would mention as ugly, and this isn't a personal belief of my own, but from the two women sat behind me who, sorry, I was eavesdropping on your conversation, they didn't love how graphic the depiction of Jesus's crucifixion was. Because they just straight up got on with it. They were like, yeah, let's just recreate it. I did enjoy the fact that the cross was made of, like, backstage equipment, like the stand of a big speaker and stuff like that. Like, I thought that was very creative. But yeah, they didn't appreciate that. Like, it was quite gruesome to a degree. Like, it wasn't a pleasant thing to watch. So I will put that out there as well. I'm going to put that in the ugly category just because it wasn't my opinion, and I do think some people maybe were more sensitive to this than others. But there you have it, the good, the bad and the ugly. I have a bunch of other notes in here that I was just kind of going to go through and show you because they're a little bit chaotic. And I feel as though there are some things that I haven't necessarily mentioned in the good, the bad and the ugly because they weren't maybe like big enough things to point out. I did find amusing because this show is sung entirely through is that a lot of people didn't really know when to clap, and I kind of agree with them because there's some songs that are songs and other songs that are dialogue, if that makes sense. So some songs, they have this nice little button at the end that wrap it up and you can be like, right, now I clap. Whereas others, it's just like two people having a conversation and there was a little like, people weren't really sure what to do. So I did really enjoy that. I loved the use of glitter as well. Like, when Jesus was being whipped, woman was just pounding him with glitter, and because he was covered in fake blood and stuff, it would just kind of like clung to him, and I thought that was great. Like when they shone spotlights on him and stuff, the like glitter would reflect. I thought that was really interesting and really cool. Really loved that. The guy playing Anat as well, who was like one of Caesar's prefects, I think, absolutely shredding on the guitar at one point, like properly going for it. That was very impressive. And speaking of music, the harmonies were all really tight as well. Really loved that. The whole character of Judas as well, I think, was a highlight for me. I loved the moment where he sort of took the blood money and reached into the chest and came out with silver paint, like dripping down him. That was really good. And then when Judas later goes on to off himself, he has this whole moment where he's singing with a microphone that's got a bright red microphone cable, and to symbolise being hung, he climbs up a ladder and then drops the microphone, which I thought was really nice. It was a really tasteful representation of it, as I have heard in the past that some shows have gone down the more graphic route and actually shown that, which I think it can be really tacky and unnecessary when this sort of so beautifully got the same message across. Speaking of that, when we saw him reappear again in the afterlife, he had silver all around his neck as well, which I really appreciated. It was like a nice little kind of continuation of the silver theme he had going on. I will say, as someone who watched this with no religious context, you could very much see the show being like a romantic drama, okay? Judas is jealous that Jesus is getting with Mary, okay? So he decides to get back at Jesus by snitching on him to the Romans. And then, grief-stricken by what he has done, he can't live anymore. And then he's reunited with his boyfriend Jesus in heaven. That was the, like, there was quite a lot of, like, gay undertones. Or at least that's how I watched it. And I think it made it more enjoyable as a result. But I'm also aware that that's probably not how everyone else watched it. And then the only other thing, like, it felt a little bit odd. Because, like, at the very end, obviously, you know, you've got Jesus, he's just been crucified. The song ends and everyone's like, oh my god, that's amazing. But I'm like, why are we cheering his crucifixion? What is going on here? I do think that was hilarious to me. There were people like full on sobbing around me as well. I wasn't that emotionally moved. Maybe if you were of the religious variety, you might have been. I was just kind of, I was gripped. It was like, you know, watching a really sort of well done BBC drama. Like, I was like, oh my god. You know, it wasn't exactly a plot twist at the end. I think everyone knew where the show was going. But it was really exciting and interesting to see how they were doing it. But I think that is everything I have to say on Jesus Christ Superstar for now. I know that was probably the most chaotic 15-20 minutes of your life. If you have seen Jesus Christ Superstar, whether it is this new touring production or the old production, let me know down in the comments and let me know what you think. If there's things I've touched on that didn't happen in the original, please let me know, as I have literally no knowledge about what the original production was like. If you did enjoy this review, however chaotic it was, make sure you are subscribed so that you don't miss out on all of my future vlogs and reviews, as I promise you the chaotic energy continues. Go and check some of my other videos out if you don't believe me. And as always, here is a rundown on what we have coming up. I have Wizard of Oz once again at the Edinburgh Playhouse, but I also have Hadestown. Yes, you heard me right, Hadestown in London. Potentially Choir of Man. I'm hassling my friend to see if we can book the tickets, but he's not being very responsive, so hang tight on that one. But as you can see, a lot of very exciting theatre content coming your way, so do stay tuned, subscribe so you don't miss it, and as always, my lovelies, remember to stay stagey. Bye!